The Niyugi are a truly evil and despicable race, and maybe the worst we have written about so far. How such small creatures can wield so much power must seem strange at first. But once you find out that they can use their brains to mind control and enslave other creatures, you understand that they force the strong to do their fighting for them. They are creatures who are best avoided whenever possible, as they are a testament that greed corrupts all. We'd be remiss if we didn't take a second to discuss our disgust with slavery and the problems that this race represents. Spelljammer holds a special place in our hearts. Still, we have to admit, we are a bit surprised they brought the creature back, given that they exist solely around the owning and controlling of other creatures. These creatures are, without a doubt, wholly evil, and there is nothing positive we can say about them. The introduction of these creatures can be quite problematic in a game, especially since many other creatures like them have been altered to be softened in their behavior. The Neogi can first be found in the Spelljammer Adventures in Space box set from 1989, and then are reprinted in the Monster Manual from 1993. They are a new creature in Dungeons & Dragons, and they were created as an original inhabitant of the Spelljammer campaign setting. They are one of the most, if not the most, vile and evil creatures we have looked at so far. These xenophobic creatures are so evil that when spotted, other races will attack them on sight, which says a lot. While the books state that this is the reason that they are such cruel and ruthless creatures, we aren't sure it isn't the fact that they love eating living creatures and enslaving any that they don't feel like munching on, regardless of who or what made them such vile beings. Even the Illithid and the Beholder can give them a wide berth, as they don't care much to become subjugated by them. To imagine what a Neogi looks like, think of a large wolf spider the size of a golden retriever, and then attach a moray eel where the spider's head should be. That's what the Niyugi look like. Oh, and also imagine that they are as colorful as a rainbow. While it might seem like an odd sight to imagine, the Niyugi dye their bodies in various colors to display their status and rank amongst the race. So it gets weirder. This would create quite a strange sight for outsiders if they were to watch hundreds of Niyugi swarm onto a spell jamming vessel, devouring any living creature on it as if they were a rainbow of death and cruelty. For a clearer picture, the Niyugi have dozens of sharp little teeth, and their arms end in razor-sharp claws. Neither of these attacks is incredibly dangerous, but we're not done yet. Their bite comes with a slowing poison that stacks with each bite, making it nearly impossible to run away, so plan on dying via a death by 1,000 tiny little munches. If being bitten slashed to death isn't the worst fate for their victim, it can get worse. If you are an unlucky victim, 10% of all Niyugi can cast spells, with some capable of casting up to 8 level spells, and that's not even the worst part of this race. The Niyugi are slavers, and their entire civilization revolves around the concept of property and ownership. The Niyugi keep Umbra Hulks as their slaves, mentally controlling them and breeding the creatures to serve them for the entirety of their lives. Any Umbra Hulk that isn't cut out for being a slave has one final purpose: the main course in the Niyugi's next meal. The life of a slave is usually pretty short, since any task that the Niyugi deems too dangerous beneath them, they will have the Umbra Hulk do for them. The Umbra Hulk refers to the Niyugi as their small lords, and they are branded with the Niyugi symbol on their left shoulder, front, and back. If an Umbra Hulk's master dies, their new master's brand is placed below the old one, and so some old Umbra Hulks may have a dozen brands on them. A number of Umbra Hulk slaves a Niyugi has is an important part of where they stand in their culture. A Niyugi with only a single Umbra Hulk is destined for a short life, as once their slave dies, that Niyugi is no longer deemed an owner, but an owned, and becomes a slave. Niyugi rate their slaves, and one lucky Umbra Hulk will become its servant and bodyguard. If a Niyugi loses all their slaves and becomes an owned, they must work diligently to gain a slave, only stopping once they are dead, made a meal by the others of its kind, or have accumulated at least one slave and they regain the rank of owner. The Niyugi do not have a nation, as most of the other cultures do within the Spelljammer universe. Instead, they travel on their spelljamming ships, raiding and pillaging and basically spreading chaos wherever they go. The most common of the Niyugi ships is the Death Spider, which is a massive ship that can grapple other ships and tear huge holes into them, allowing the Niyugi slaves to charge forward and secure the cargo. Of course, in this instance, cargo is just more slaves to feed the Niyugi and do their bidding. The newest ship to the fleet is the Mind Spider. It is different in that it is controlled by an Overmaster Niyugi who can run the ship remotely from a command post, allowing them to escape any danger. While the Niyugi supposedly obtained these ships from the Arcane race, the Arcane themselves refute this claim, claiming they do not know the ships or how they function. Niyugi will only work together when it suits their needs, and this happens quite infrequently. When two other groups of Niyugi decide to get together, whether to form an alliance or to have Sunday brunch, they must first determine who the big boss Niyugi will be. This Overmaster title comes with the rule over all others, effectively making the other Niyugi and their Umbra Hulks its slaves. The title of Overmaster may be decided upon peacefully, but it's usually done through a trial of combat. If you want the right to be called Overmaster, you and your Umbra Hulk must fight to win. Win, and you are the new Overmaster. Lose, and the other Niyugi eat you. Did we not mention that the Niyugi are cannibals? They sure are, so we can add that to the list of disturbing facts about them. Of course, if you are a Niyugi and you have somehow lived a long life, what type of retirement plan are you given? Well, when you reach the ripe old age of whenever you start losing your mind, which can happen whenever the other Niyugi deem you are becoming crazy, you'll suddenly find over a dozen Niyugi checking up on you. These young whippersnappers will begin biting you a lot. As more and more of them bite you, more poison is introduced into you until you are transformed by it into the great old master, becoming a massive Niyugi that is easily 20 feet across. Now that you've been transformed, all you do is eat. The other Niyugi will bring you food, dead or alive, preferably alive, and since you can't move, you just get to eat and eat and eat. After 2 months of this, the cycle of life will be complete and your insides will suddenly want out and you're ripped open with 20 to 40 fully matured Niyugi bursting forth. If you are just a few weeks into your happy feeding fest and someone happens to attack you and they split your skin, up to 8 Niyugi will pour forth like a mama spider holding her babies within until she gets squished. If that isn't bad enough, and you stick around to watch, all newborn Niyugi will start attacking each other for days on end until only 3 to 6 of them survive. Then they get the honor of becoming slaves of the ship they're on, until they find themselves some Umbra Hulks to enslave. It's an amazing circle of life. Of course, if the idea of letting a Niyugi impregnate you with their poison doesn't sound very appealing, you aren't alone. Some Niyugi become known as Reavers, and they aren't keen on the whole being ripped open when you give birth to 40 Niyugi. The other Niyugi think that this is not very cool and will hunt you down, with a vengeance, all so that they can continue the production of more Niyugi. While the Reavers are still mean as hell, they are often even crueler than their brethren as they are willing to do whatever it takes to escape their fate. In The War Captain's Companion from 1992, a strange lot of Niyugi are revealed to operate within Gray Space, the crystal sphere of Greyhawk. Known as the Free Niyugi, they claim they are the only Niyugi free traders in existence, and from the outside they are a harmless group of traders who seem to have lost their thirst for cruelty and slaves. Of course, that can't possibly be true. In truth, they are still slavers, but they have such a mastery over illusion that when they are inspected by orthodox inspectors, they will only find common goods meant for trade, like bolts of cloths or foodstuffs. Those crates and kegs actually hold gagged and bound slaves who have been picked up from Orth and are taken to the frozen world near the outside of the gray space crystal sphere, where they are deposited, still bound and gagged, and flash frozen. The Free Niyugi then sell their refrigerated stock to any passing Niyugi ships that happen to be looking for some food on their ongoing journeys throughout the wild space. Out in the Astromonde cluster, a crystal sphere is detailed in the Astromonde cluster box set from 1993. There is a nation in Niyugi that is 1 billion strong and are known as neutral traders. They will sell anything to anyone and are not overly picky about who they deal with or what they are trading in. They have bases throughout the cluster of asteroids that make up most of the sphere and are rarely militaristic as they can get what they want through trading. They still aren't pleasant to deal with as they are massive slave traders, which is legal in this crystal sphere, and they only have their best interest at heart. No one dare stands against them, as they are the largest traders in the crystal sphere and they could enact embargoes that would cripple and destroy the cluster if they are engaged. As if the Niyugi weren't horrible enough, Dragon Magazine number 184 gives the creatures more spells, magical items, and a new, more terrifying Umbra Hulk to control. Some of these spells include Venom Bite, described as the Niyugi's version of Magic Missile, Spider Gout, a venomous ball of magical Niyugi spit, and Leather Hatchling, a spell where the Niyugi can impregnate you by shooting an egg inside of you. If you fail enough saves, a baby Niyugi will hatch and devour you from the inside. Fun times. The Niyugi can now control a new Umbra Hulk creature, the Undead Umbra Hulk. If one of the Niyugi's Umbra Hulks die, they can magically raise them to create this zombie. Undead Umbra Hulks are actually considered magical constructs, existing only to serve their master, and they largely act the same as a living Umbra Hulk, looking to grab onto you and hug you to death. The main difference is they no longer feel pain, and just keep squeezing until you are crushed in its undeath grip. In the Planescape Monstrous Compendium number 2 from 1995, we are introduced to the Sub, a cousin of the Niyugi. If you thought that you could escape the Niyugi by heading off to the outer planes, well, you'd be wrong, as they make their home throughout those planes too. The So are much taller than the Nyogi and they're similar in shape, but they use their front spider legs like hands and can stand up to 6 feet tall. They are more social creatures than the Nyogi and travel the plains without being attacked. Well, attacked too often. The So can also be found on vessels traveling throughout the plains, similar to how the Nyogi use spelljammers. Their vessels are bizarre and shaped like a monstrous spider, flying through the sky in search of travelers to enslave. Their society revolves around accumulating wealth, making them shady but adept traders. Dragon Magazine number 214 brings us the Ecology of the Nyogi written by John Winter, which brings us a first-hand account of a Nyogi raid. There are a few tidbits of new information provided that can help give us some interesting details of what life on board a Nyogi vessel is like. These ships are kept dark because while the light isn't harmful to Nyogi, they are sensitive to it and will avoid it at all costs. That slowing poison that every Nyogi can produce will eventually, given enough doses, act like a charm spell, giving the Nyogi mental control over their victims. Also, the article describes in graphic detail just how brutal and cruel the Nyogi are, just in case you hadn't figured it out yet. Torture, painful slaughter, and cruel masters are just few of the scenes that we are subjected to.
The Nyogi first appear in the 3rd edition Monster Manual 2, released in 2001, giving us information for the Nyogi spawn, adult Nyogi, and the Great Old Master. They are spread out from Wildspace and Spelljammers campaign setting, making their homes anywhere they please, mostly because they see themselves as the proper owner of all things. In their culture, they believe that they own everything, either they did in the past, present, or will in the future, and that it is only the proper course of life to own. Those who don't own are in fact owned, which is something no Nyogi ever wants to be. The Nyogi are still hideous creatures with stiff tan hair, a long flexible neck and head like that of an eel, and the body of a giant wolf spider. They're still quite small and so can ride their Umbra Hulk slaves around wherever they want to go, showing off their awesome colorful fur that they dye to dictate their rank and standing within Nyogi's society. They're still the same dreadful but colorful creatures that everyone should fear. Now that they no longer live on Spelljammer ships, they can be found in underground layers with pits, chasms, narrow bridges, and precarious ledges. As they are part spider, they have a natural climb speed that makes these dangerous places easy to navigate for them, though not so much for all the slaves they like to accumulate. We can only assume that they have lost many slaves to their flagrant disregard for safety measures, like a railing. While the Nyogi are still not great fighters, they are slave owners and so have people to fight for them. By that we mean that they have Umbra Hulks to fight for them and a bunch of other slaves hanging around for snack time. For the Nyogi, their culture is still based on being an owner or being owned. Much of their life remains the same from the previous edition, along with the problem of getting old. No one likes to get old, but the Nyogi have a really good reason why they hate going through it. At least now, when a Great Old Master is formed, they don't just spontaneously create Nyogi babies in them. The other Nyogi implant eggs in them that birth baby Nyogi that begin chewing their way out to get out of the Great Old Master's body. Alright, maybe that's not any better. The Nyogi are shown some serious love in the Lords of Madness, released in 2005, where they are known as the Slave Takers, which is all you really need to know about them. The book updates the stat blocks, includes a Nyogi-based adventure, and attempts to expound on what despicable creatures they are. It isn't hard to do, considering what we've already been told about them. They are vile, ruthless, and believe themselves to be the greatest merchants, regardless of the fact they also engage in piracy. Along with more information on the ecology and what makes a Nyogi tick, there are also a few new variants introduced. The dwarf Nyogi is basically the litter's runt and is seen as a prized possession to be owned by other Nyogi. Being seen as weak and pathetic, the dwarf Nyogi are even crueler and more ruthless than their normal brothers, which some may find hard to believe. They are valued because of their greater ability to use magic, lashing out with their minds to blast apart disobeying slaves and force them into compliance. The next is the Nyogi Defiler, who is seen as the Nyogi's society's rogues and scouts, and they are mistrusted more than the average Nyogi. Unlike normal Nyogi, they can spit their poison out, allowing them to hide behind their Umbra Hulk bodyguards and shoot their poison at range. Not only are they extra sneaky, they are also often unpredictable, known for acting out in strange ways that can frighten even the staunchest of Nyogi. Up next are the Nyogi Slave Master, who have enhanced abilities when it comes to enslaving others, which puts them in high demand when the Nyogi go out looking for fresh stock. Because of their power to own more slaves than the average Nyogi, they are held in high regard and usually rise to high-level positions within Nyogi society, like the Administrarch, the overseer of a Nyogi colony. The last of the variant Nyogi are the Sorcerers, and they are, as you might guess, a Nyogi that has magical powers. They are the richest of their kind and are the only Nyogi that another cannot own as a slave. These creatures even get a familiar, the common being weasels, with snakes as their second choice and rats a distant third. The sourcebook breaks a bit from the previous Nyogi society description by stating that their society is held together by a three-cornered commercial trade platform. These three pieces are mercantilism, slavery, and piracy. Now, the Nyogi are all about trade, but they are willing to devolve from that. If they can't barter or trade, then the Nyogi will flat out steal from you, and probably steal you at the same time. Why anyone would engage in any business with them is beyond us, for they are completely unethical and savage creatures who care less about anything in the world but themselves. Apparently, in the multiverse, capitalism's ethos still holds, wealth is king and greed is good. The structure of their culture is based on slaves and the ownership of slaves. It is broken down into 4 simple tiers. Tier 1 is the basic slave, no power or status, and you have no purpose but to serve, be bought, or devoured as food. You don't even belong to a single Nyogi, as you're just communal property at this tier. The second tier is still being a slave, but you have an owner. This owner will have no more than 3 personal slaves at one time, as that is all that a Nyogi can reliably enslave with their magic at a time. Tier 3 is the Umbra Hulk slavery tier, and you can have any number of Umbra Hulk slaves as you see it as the natural circle of life. The more Umbra Hulks, which are gifted to a worthy Nyogi for certain deeds, the greater the Nyogi. The final tier, 4, is owning other Nyogi. When a Nyogi becomes a slave to another, they retain their own slaves, even as they are owned. Their poor slaves now belong to the original owner and that owner's new master. There is also a look at the Nyogi and their religious affinity, which only goes so far as what they can get out of it. They have a few primary deities that they worship, but in reality, whichever deity serves their current purpose is the one they will pray to. The primary deity they worship is Tharizdun, as they see the demon as a kindred spirit who embraces greed. Other Nyogi see the Patient One as an appropriate deity to worship, as this gluttonous god loves to dominate lesser creatures by eating them. A few others belong to the cult of Vecna, though they keep their patronage a bit hushed up. Nyogi don't like the idea of worshipping a human deity, seeing it as beneath them.
Found in the 4th edition Monster Manual 2 from 2009, the Nyogi are still jerks, viewing everything as something to be owned, with the strong ruling over the weak. Nothing is mentioned of where they live, or of their cool flying ships. While nothing much changes for them, there are some hidden tidbits. An interesting reveal is that they are creatures from the far realm and that they were once slave of a mind flayer-like race. They didn't enjoy being a slave, imagine that, so they have now decided to be the owner instead of the owned. There are 3 different types of Nyogi that we learn about: the Nyogi Slaver, the Nyogi Swarm, and the Great Old Master. Slavery is still a focal point for the Nyogi, especially the Slaver. If you end up having to fight a slaver, good news, they won't kill you in battle. They'll just force you to submit against their mental onslaught and add you to their feeding stock, keep you as a slave, or sell you off to a drow or devil. So while you aren't dead, you probably aren't going to enjoy your upcoming life very much. The Nyogi Swarm acts as one in an attempt to devour anything that isn't a Nyogi or the slave of a Nyogi. We guess the other Nyogi would probably get ticked off if the swarm of babies ate their slaves, so they probably know better. They are not fully formed Nyogi, but rather slugs whose sole purpose in living is to devour everything in its path. The primary attack is, not surprisingly, a bite, but they can also release a horrific scream if they get hurt, smashing into your mind like a wave of force. One of the biggest changes in this edition is that the Grand Old Master is no longer a mentally diminished, mindless eating machine that is going to pop on its big day when they give birth to new Nyogi who will seek out to enslave the universe. The Grand Old Master is now the big boss of the Nyogi clan, carrying his fertile eggs of the colony and watching over all its Nyogi to ensure that they continue. We guess this is a nice upgrade for them, and maybe retirement isn't all that bad now. The Nyogi get their second Ecology of article in Dragon Magazine 427, written by Jeff Morgengroth. Much of the information is taken from the previous editions, but there are some new or updated items to touch upon. The Neogi travel in the Underdark, but some still travel throughout the plains, terrorizing and enslaving the other races that live or dare to cross them. The So, who roam the astral sea and the elemental chaos, are pirates and smugglers who ride around in spider-shaped flying vessels. The So are enormously brazen creatures, attacking the Githyanki or Jin ships with no fear. The Nyogi speak their own language and can communicate telepathically. In addition, they know several trade languages which help them make the deals they want with other races, or give them the orders when they're slaves. Their telepathic abilities are put on full display when you become a slave, as they will use their innate ability to command you whether you realize it or not. They use their impressive intelligence to connive and conspire, plotting against other races and other Nyogi in an attempt to dominate others, even if it is their own race. Interestingly enough, the Nyogi are described as social creatures, but it is a misnomer. They are only social amongst themselves, and even then, their sense of cooperation ends when it comes to divvying up treasure or slaves. Treasure is nice, but slaves are better, and once again, Umbra Hulk slaves are the best.
Sadly, well, maybe not. The Nyogi are forced to wait until they appear in 5th edition's Volo's Guide to Monsters, released in 2016. They now get around, living on the material plane's outskirts, the Feywild, Shadowfell, the astral and ethereal planes. They are still small little jerks with a spider's body and eel neck. They can dominate other creatures and are slavers of the worst kind. Umbra Hulks are still the unfortunate creatures they most like to enslave, but they aren't very picky. What they don't enslave, they will consume, and if you turn out to be a crummy slave, there's a good chance you'll be eaten too, or traded off to the mind flayers who think that a mind is a terrible thing to waste. There are 3 Nyogi introduced with the hatchling, the Nyogi, and the master. Hatchlings are spawned from the master, who is once again poisoned in their old age, but this time gets eggs laid on top of them and are then eaten from the outside in by the hatchlings. Once they finish dinner, that being the master, they will then turn upon one another. Those lucky few that survive their brutal childhood eventually grow up to become big and strong Nyogi. Well, maybe not big or strong, as they're still quite small and frail. The Nyogi return to the skies in their spider vehicles, utilizing slaves to design and build their ships so that they can traverse the plains. A limited number of Nyogi can also use magic, having gained the ability through an unspecified agreement with unknown aberrant entities they met when leaving their home world, like ancient elder evils whose very names shouldn't be uttered unless you are willing to get a bit of unwanted attention. We cannot say that Nyogi have friends now, but at least everyone doesn't completely despise them, mostly because those who don't despise them make the Nyogi look like angels. It's all about ownership and dominating other creatures again for the Nyogi. Creatures were put in the multiverse to be controlled, preferably by the Nyogi. This includes the weak Nyogi, as the focus of their culture remains the strong dominate the weak. Of course, we don't mean strong in the physical sense, but the mental sense, as the Nyogi use their enslavability to charm a creature and bend it to their will. Their mentality is defined in a new and interesting way, as the Nyogi are devoid of certain emotions. Hate and love are foreign concepts, and only authority and strength are what command respect and loyalty, and to do otherwise is a sign of weakness. The Nyogi have crawled out of wild space and realms beyond, vowing to never be the owned. They seek to own as much as they can steal, buy, and murder. As owners, they are cruel and vicious. They don't care about the feelings of others and think living creatures are only good as food or if they are being used. If you see a great flying ship that looks vaguely like a spider, it's best to run and hide, as you are little more than property to them.